Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while, but I, Turbo, have returned. And this time we are looking at Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. Boom! They knocked again. Dudley jerked awake. "Where's the cannon?" he said stupidly. There was a crash behind them, and Uncle Buron came skittling down into the room. He was holding a rifle in his hands. Oh shit, he's with the NRA. Now they knew what had been in the long thin package he had brought with them. "Who's there?" he shouted. "I warn you, I'm armed." There was a pause, then smash! The door was hit with such force that it swung clean off its hinges, and with a deafening crash, landed flat on the floor. A giant of a man was standing in the doorway. His face was almost completely hidden. No worries. Sorry, I thought we had technical difficulty. We're good. Back to the story. His face was completely hidden by a long, shaggy mane of hair and a wild, tangled beard, but you could make out his eyes, glinting like black beetles under all the hair. The giant squeezed his way into the hut, stooping so that his head just brushed the ceiling. He bent down and picked up the door and fitted it easily back into its frame. The noise of the storm outside dropped a little. He turned to look at them all. "Couldn't make us a cup of tea, could ya?" "It's not been an easy journey." He strode over to the sofa, where Dudley sat frozen with fear. "Budge up, you great lump," said the stranger. Dudley squeaked and ran to hide behind his mother. Yeah, he would. Who was crouching, terrified, behind Uncle Buron. "Ah, here's Harry," said the giant. Harry looked up into the fierce, wild, shadowy face and saw that the beetle eyes were crinkled in a smile. "Last time I saw you, ye was only a baby," said the giant. "Yeah, looks a lot like your dad, but you've got your mom's eyes." Uncle Buron made a funny, rasping noise. Rasp! I don't know what rasping sounds like. "I demand that you leave here at once," he said. "You are breaking and entering." "Ah, shut up, Dursley, you great prune," said the giant. He reached over the back of the sofa, jerked the gun out of Uncle Buron's hands, and bent it into a knot as easily as if he had been made of rubber, and threw it into the corner of the room. Uncle Buron made another funny noise, like a mouse being trodden on. "Anyway, Harry," said the giant, turning his back on the Dursleys, "a very happy birthday to ye. Got something for you here. I might have sat on it at some point, but it'll taste alright." From an inside pocket of his black overcoat, he pulled a slightly squashed box. Harry opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a large, sticky chocolate cake with "Happy Birthday, Harry" written on it in green icing. Harry looked up at the giant. He meant to say thank you, but the words got lost on the way to his mouth, and what he said instead was, "Who are you?" The giant chuckled. "Ha ha ha. True, I haven't introduced myself. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts." He held out an enormous hand and shook Harry's whole arm. "What about that tea then, eh?" he said, rubbing his hands together. "I'll not say, somewhat stronger. Oh, somewhat stronger. British is such a hard language. If you've got it, mind." His eyes fell on the empty grate with the shriveled crisp packets in it, and he snorted. He bent down over the fireplace. They couldn't see what he was doing, but when he drew back a second later, there was a roaring fire there. It filled the whole damp hut with flickering light, and Harry felt the warmth wash over him as he thought he'd snuck into a hot bath. You just sneak in the hot baths with, like, 8-foot tall men? You do you, Harry. Actually doesn't sound like a bad Saturday night. Anyways. The giant sat back down on the sofa, which sagged under his weight, and began taking all sorts of things out of the pockets of his coat. A copper kettle, a squashing package of sausages, a poker, a teapot, several chip mugs, and a bottle of some amber liquid, which he took a swig from before starting to make tea. Soon the hut was full of the sound and smell of sizzling sausage. Nobody said a thing while the giant was working, but as he slid the first 6 fat, juicy, slightly burnt sausages from the poker, Dudley fidgeted a little. Uncle Boron says sharply, "Don't touch anything he gives you, Dudley." The giant chuckled darkly. "You're a great pudding of a son. Needs fattening anymore." Dursley, "Don't worry." He passed the sausage to Harry, who was so hungry he had never tasted anything so wonderful. But he still couldn't take his eyes off the giant. Finally, as nobody seemed about to explain anything, he said, "I'm sorry, but I still don't really know who you are." The giant took a gulp of tea and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Call me Hagrid," he said. "Everyone does. And like I told you, I'm the keeper of the keys at Hogwarts." "You all know about Hogwarts, of course." No," said Harry. Hagrid looked shocked. "Sorry," Harry said quickly. "Sorry!" barked Hagrid, turning to stare at the Dursleys, who shrank back into the shadows. "It's them as should be sorry. I knew you weren't getting your letters, but I never thought you wouldn't know about Hogwarts, for crying out loud. Did you ever wonder where your parents learned it all? All what?" "All what?" Hagrid thundered. "Now wait just 1 second." He leapt to his feet in anger, as he seemed to fill the whole hut. The Dursleys were cowering against the wall. "Do you mean to tell me," he growled, "that this boy knows nothing about anything?" Harry thought this was going a bit far. He had been to school after all, and his marks weren't bad. "I know some things. I can, do maths and stuff." But Hagrid simply waved his hand and said, "About our world. I mean your world, my world, your parents' world." "What world?" Hagrid looked as if he was about to explode. "Dursleys!" he boomed. Uncle Boron, who had gone very pale, whispered something that sounded like Mibblewibble. Mibblewibble. Hagrid stared wildly at Harry. "But you must know about your mom and dad," he said. "I mean, they're famous. You're famous." "What? My mom? My mom and dad weren't famous, were they?" "You don't know! You don't know!" Hagrid ran his fingers through his hair, fixing Harry with a bewildered stare. "You don't know what ye are," he said finally. Uncle Boron suddenly found his voice. "Stop!" he commanded. "Stop right there! Sir, I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Burne Dursley would have quailed under the fierce look Hagrid now gave him. When Hagrid spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him! Never told him! What was in the letter Dursley left for him? What was in the letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you kept it from him all these years." "Kept what from me?" "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Boron in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "Ah, go boil your heads, both of ye." Hagrid, "Harry, you're a wizard." There was a silence inside the hut. Only the tea and the whistling could be heard. I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting back down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even louder, and a thumping good one, I'd say, once he'd been trained up a bit. With a mom and dad like yours, what else would you be, eh? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." Harry stretched out his hand, and at last, to take the yellowish envelope addressed in the emerald green. "To Mr. H. Potter, the floor hut on the rock, the sea." He pulled out the letter and read, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Sorcerer, Chief Warlock, Supreme Muckwump, International Confederacy of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have a place at Hogwarts, School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find and close a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on this 1st September. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Questions exploded inside Harry's head like fireworks, and he couldn't decide which to ask first. After a few minutes, he stammered, "What does it mean? They await my owl?" "Galloping Gorings, that reminds me," said Hagrid, clapping a hand to his forehead with enough force to knock over a cart horse, and from yet another pocket inside his overcoat, he pulled an owl, a real live, rather ruffled-looking owl, a long quill, and a roll of parchment. With his tongue between his teeth, he scribbled a note, which Harry could read upside down. Dear Mr. Dumbledore, given Harry his letter, taking him to buy his things tomorrow. Weather's horrible, hope you're well. Rubeus Hagrid. Hagrid rolled up the note, gave it to the owl, which clamped it in its beak, went to the door, and threw the owl out into the storm. Then he came back and sat down as though this was as normal as talking on the telephone. Harry realized his mouth was open and closed it quickly. Where was I? Said Hagrid. But at that moment, Uncle Buron, still ashen-faced, but looking very angry, moved into the firelight. He's not going, he said. Hagrid grunted. I'd like to see a muggle like you stop him, he said. A what? Harry said, interested. A muggle, said Hagrid. I know I'm not supposed to use that, it's like the M word, but that's what they are, muggles. It's what we call non-magic folk, like them. And it's your bad luck you grew up in a family of the biggest muggles I've ever laid eyes on. We swore when we took him in, we'd put a stop to the rubbish, said Uncle Buron. Swore we'd stamp it out of him. Yeah, pray the wizard away, Uncle Buron. Jesus Christ, what would you have done if he was gay? I don't want to know. Wizard indeed. You knew I'm a wizard. Knew, shrieked Aunt Petunia. Suddenly, knew, of course we knew. How could you not be? My dreaded sister, being what she was, oh, she got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school and came home every holiday with her pockets full of frog spawn, turning teacups into rats. I was the only one who saw her for what she really was, a freak. But my mother and father, oh no, it was Lily this and Lily that. They were proud of having a witch in the family. She stopped to draw a deep breath and then went ranting on. It seemed she had been waiting to say all this for years. Then she met the Potter. But then she met that Potter at school. And they left and got married and had you. And of course I knew you'd be just as strange, just as abnormal. And then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up. And she got landed, and we got landed with you. You could have literally just given him to anyone else. Like, fucking, spoiler alert, Harry's dad had friends who probably would have taken care of him. We'll get to that in a few years. Blown up? You told me they died in a car crash. Car crash? Roared Hagrid, jumping up so angrily that the Dursleys scuttled back to their corner. How could a car crash kill Lily and James Potter? It's an outrage, a scandal. Harry not knowing his own story, when every kid in our world knows his name? But why? What happened? Harry asked urgently, the anger faded from Hagrid's face. He looked suddenly anxious. I, never expected this, he said in a lowered voice. I had no idea when Dumbledore told me there might be trouble getting a hold of ye, how much ye didn't know. Ah, Harry, I don't know if I'm the right person to tell you, but, someone's gotta. You can't go off there Hogwarts not knowing. He threw a dirty look at the Dursleys. Well, it's best you know as much as I can tell you. Mind, I can't tell you everything. It's a great mystery, parts of it. Could be stretched down to 7 books and maybe 8 movies. That's how good of a mystery it is. But anyways, he sat down and stared into the fire for a few seconds, and then said, "It begins, I suppose, with a person called, but it's incredible. You don't know his name. Everyone in our world knows. Who? Well, I don't like saying the name if I can help it. No one is. Why not? Gulping gargoyles. Harry, people are still scared. Blimey, this is difficult. See, there was this wizard who went bad as ye could go. Worse than worse. His name was Haggard Gulp." But no words came out. "Could you write it down?" Harry suggested. "Nah, can't spell." "All right, Voldemort." Haggard shuddered. "Don't make me say it again. Anyways, this wizard, about 20 years ago now, started looking for followers. Got him, too. Some were afraid. Some just want a bit of his power. 'Cause he was getting himself power. All right, dark days, Harry. Didn't know who to trust. Didn't dare get friendly with strange wizards or witches. Terrible things happened. He was taken over. Of course, some stood up to him. And he killed him horribly. One of the only safe places left was Hogwarts. Reckon Dumbledore's the only one you know who was afraid of. Didn't dare try to take the school. No, not just then anyway. Now your mom and dad were as good as a witch and wizard as I ever knew. Head boy and girl at Hogwarts in their day. Suppose the mystery is why you know who never tried to get him on his side before.
Even a fine weapon is only as good as its wielder, sir.
Probably knew they were too close to Dumbledore.
Right you are, Elf. Even from the rebels, they've got enough money to make it.
As always,
Anything that, like, do they ever want anything to do with the dark side? The dark side? Is this Star Wars now? Okay. Maybe he thought he could persuade him. Maybe he just wanted him out of the way. All anyone knows is he turned up in the village where you were all living on Halloween 10 years ago. You were just a year old. He came to your house and Haggard suddenly pulled out a very dirty handkerchief and blew his nose with a sound like a foghorn. "Sorry," he said, "but it's that sad. Knew your mom and dad and other and nicer people couldn't find anyway. But you know who killed him. And then, and this is the real mystery of the thing, he tried to kill you too. Want to make a clean job of it, I suppose, or maybe he just liked killing by then. But he couldn't do it. Never wondered how you got that mark on your forehead? That's no ordinary cut. That's what you get when a powerful evil curse touches you. Took care of your mom and dad and your house, even, but it didn't work on you. And that's why you're famous. Harry, no one ever lived after he decided to kill him. No one except you. And he killed some of the best witches and wizards of the age. The McGinnons, the Bones, the Purites, and you was only a baby, and you lived. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw, again, the blinding flash of green light. More clearly than he had ever remembered it before. Then he remembered something else for the first time in his life. A high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. Took ye from the ruined house myself, on Dumbledore's orders. Brought ye to this lot. Load of old tosh, said Uncle Buron. Harry jumped. He'd almost forgotten that the Dursleys were there. Uncle Buron certainly seemed to have got back his courage. He was glaring at Hagrid, and his fists were clenched. Now, you listen here, boy, he snarled. I accept there's something strange about you. Probably nothing a good beating would have cured. And as for all this about your parents, well, they were weirdos, no denied, and the world's better off without them, in my opinion. So Hagrid kills him, right? Hagrid, Oh, fuck no. He's not gonna be killed. Shit. Wow, just, oh my god. Somebody called child services, for fuck's sakes. Anyways, back to the story. The world is better off without them, in my opinion. Asked for all they got, getting mixed up with these wizarding types. Just what I expected. Always knew they would come to a sticky end. But at that moment, Hagrid leapt from the sofa and drew a battered pink umbrella from inside his coat, pointing this at Uncle Dursley like a sword. He said, "I'm warning you, Dursley. I'm warning you. One more word." In danger of being speared on the end of an umbrella by a bearded giant, Uncle Vernon's courage failed again. He flattened himself against the wall and fell silent. "That's better," said Hagrid, breathing heavily and sitting back down on the sofa, which this time sagged right down to the floor. Harry, meanwhile, still had questions to ask, hundreds of them. But what happened to Sorry, I mean, you know who. Good question, Harry. Disappointed? Disappeared? Banished? Same night he tried to kill ye. Makes you even more famous. That's the biggest mystery, see? He was getting more and more powerful. Why'd he go? Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Some say he's still out there, biding his time. But I don't believe it. People who was on his side came back to ours. Some of them came out of kind of trances. Don't reckon they could have done if he was coming back. Most of us reckon he's still out there somewhere, but lost his powers. Too weak to carry on. 'Cause something about you finished him, Harry. There was something going on that night. He hadn't counted on. I don't know what it was. No one does. But something about you stumped him all right. It's probably something stupid like the power of love. Hagrid looked at Harry with warmth and respect blazing in his eyes. But Harry, instead of feeling pleased and proud, felt quite sure there had been a horrible mistake. A wizard! Him! How could he possibly be? He spent his life being clouted by Dudley and bullied by Aunt Petunia and Uncle Buron. If he was really a wizard, why hadn't they be turned into watery toads every time they tried to lock him in his cupboard if he had once defeated the greatest sorcerer in the world? How come Dudley had always been able to kick him around like a football? It's not your fault, Harry. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. Hagrid, he said quietly, I think you must have made a mistake. I don't think I can be a wizard. To his surprise, Hagrid chuckled. Not a wizard, eh? Never made things happen when you was scared or angry. Hagrid looked into the fire. Now he came to think about... Harry looked into the fire. Now he came to think about... Every odd thing that ever made his aunt and uncle furious with him had happened. When he, Harry, had been upset or angry, chased by Dudley's gang, he had somehow found himself out of their reach. Drudging going to school with that ridiculous haircut, he'd managed to make it grow back. And the very last time Dudley had hit him, hadn't he gotten his revenge, even without realizing he was doing it? Hadn't he set a boa constrictor on him? Harry looked back at Hagrid, smiling, and saw that Hagrid was positively beaming at him. See, said Hagrid. Harry Potter, not a wizard. You'll wait. You'll be famous right at Hogwarts. But Uncle Vernon was going to give him a fight. Haven't I told you he's not going? He hissed. He's going to Stonewall High, and he'll be grateful for it. I've read those letters. And he needs all sorts of rubbish, spell books, and wands, and if he wants to go, a great muggle like you won't stop him, growled Hagrid. Stop Lily and James Potter, son, going to Hogwarts? Ye mad. His name's been down ever since he was born. He's off to the finest school of witchcraft and wizardry in the world, 7 years there, and he won't even know himself. He'll be with youngsters of his own sort, for a change. And he'll be under the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had, Albus Dumbledore. I am not paying for some crackpot old fool to teach him magic tricks, yelled Uncle Brian. But he finally gone too far. Hagrid seized his umbrella, rolled it over his head. Never! He thundered. Insult Albus Dumbledore in front of me! He brought the umbrella, swishing down through the air to point at Dudley. There was a flash of violet light, a sound like a firecracker, a sharp squeal, and next second, Dudley was dancing on the spot, with his hands clasped over his fat bottom, howling in pain. When he turned his back on them, Harry saw a curly pig's tail poking through a hole in his trousers. Uncle Vernon roared, pulling Aunt Petunia and Dudley into the other room. He cast one last terrified look at Hagrid and slammed the door behind him. Hagrid looked down at his umbrella and stroked his beard. Shouldn't have lost my temper, he said ruefully. But it didn't work anyway. I meant to turn him into a pig, but I suppose he was much like a pig anyways. There wasn't much left to do. He cast a sideways look at Harry under his bushy eyebrows. Be grateful if you didn't mention that to anyone at Hogwarts. I'm, not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking. I was allowed to do a bit there to follow ye and get you letters to you, but I was so keen to take on the job. Why aren't you supposed to do magic? Harry asked. Oh, well, I was at Hogwarts myself, but I, got expelled, to tell you the truth, in my 3rd year. They snapped me wand in half and everything, but Dumbledore let me stay on as a gameskeeper. Great man, Dumbledore. Why were you expelled? It's getting late, and we've got lots to do tomorrow, said Hagrid. Gotta get up to their town, get all your books and that. He took off his thick black coat and threw it to Harry. You can keep under that, he said. Don't mind if it wriggles a bit. I think I got a couple of dolmice in one of the pockets. And that concludes Chapter 4. Tune in next time when we read Chapter 5 and we go and get our school supplies at Diagon Alley. I'm Turbo. Keep the party going.